evening, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Jefferson County statewide ballot issue information public meeting for the 2023 elections. I'm Kath Perrone. I'm the Vote 411 chair for the state, but I'm also a Jeffco member since 2000 and have served on the Jeffco board on and off for those years. Joining me today is Nancy Warren, who will be checking for raised hands or chat questions for me while I'm presenting. And then also as our technical support is Sandy Schuster, who has joined us also. If you want to wave, Sandy, hi. So that's cohorts that are on today. You know, the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We're grassroots. We work to protect and expand voting rights, and we ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. We empower voters and defend democracy through not only advocacy, education, and litigation, but we do it at the local, state, and national levels. And one of our big things is empowering voters, and that's what we're about tonight. Elections are our chance to stand up for what matters to us and to have an impact on the issues that affect us, our communities, our families, and our future. The League of Women Voters believes in empowering you, the voter, with straightforward information so your voice will be heard. Thank you for being an informed voter and joining us this evening. Tonight, we're going to cover the two statewide ballot issue proposals, or propositions as they're purposely called, H and II. It's not Proposition 2, it's II. They go in alphabetical order. And we'll be covering these two that will appear on your November ballot. And the ballots will be going out starting on October 16th, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation. But we're going to start with HH because that's like the most complicated one in this. It's a complex proposal that was prepared by the Colorado legislature pretty much in the last throes of their meeting. And they pretty much took everything and put it in here. So we're going to be looking at an overview, what your vote means, and then the impact on property taxes, tax refunds, known as TABOR refunds, and revenue at both the local level and at the state level, because Proposition HH touches a lot. The title of it is Reduce Property Taxes and Retain State Revenue. That seems simple enough. But let's start with the overview. And that's, it would relieve or relieves your property taxes if, and it will also fund schools and reimburse local governments using the state TABOR surplus up to the new revenue cap. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But this measure was referred to the voters by the state legislature, and it's only going to require a simple majority to pass. It will cut property taxes owed for homes and businesses for at least 10 years compared to what would be owed at the current rates. So when we use the word cuts or reliefs, that's what we're talking about, is compared to what your current levels are at and how much relief is going to be. We'll talk more about those relief points, and there's actually a calculation tool that the Colorado Legislature Council has provided that you can go in and put your information, and it will tell you how it will affect your property taxes and your TABOR refund. So it's personalized, and we'll talk more about that calculation tool shortly. It provides additional tax relief for those owner-occupied homes and multifamily residents. That's something new. It's also going to take that senior homestead exemption and make it portable. So when you move, you can actually take your exemption with you. There's no more 10-year, you have to live in your home for 10 years. So that's kind of cool. The state can retain revenue after 2032 without further voter vote if the property tax decreases equivalent to those in the current measure are maintained. So what's that saying is that Prop HH is a long-term proposition. And we'll go into detail about that in a little bit. The retained revenue will be spent on education, sent to local governments to counter their property tax revenue reduction and fund rental assistance programs a little bit. And we'll talk about those figures shortly. Prop HH will establish limits on tax revenue growth for most local governments with a mechanism to waive the new limit. And I'm hearing from across the state that some county commissioners have already come out against Prop HH because of this limit that's set in this, this proposition. And we'll go into specifics about that in a little bit. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which is also known as TABOR, refunds, the TABOR refunds for individuals will be reduced compared to the current law, but they'll also be equalized for 2023 tax year as determined by your tax filing status instead of adjusted gross income. And we'll give examples of that shortly. So what does a yes vote mean and a no vote mean? And by the way, the graphics that I'm showing are part of the handouts that, let me stop sharing for a second and share. The pamphlets that we designed at the state level to cover this. How many of you have seen these by raise of hand? Have you got your hands on one yet? Yeah. And what I just want to point out is the information that I'm going over, like what a yes vote means, what a no vote means, what the proposition highlights are or impacts is in this pamphlet written out. So you don't have to take a whole lot of notes. So what does your vote mean? If you vote yes, it's going to lower property taxes owed, allow the state to keep additional revenue that would otherwise be refunded to taxpayers, and temporarily change how taxpayer TABOR refunds are distributed and create a new property tax limit for most local governments. So like I said, it's complex, it's far-reaching. And no, a no vote would mean that it maintains the current law on property taxes, TABOR refunds, and state and local government revenue limits. So no changes would take effect for this current fiscal year for for TABOR refunds and your property tax bill for 2023. Now, the big reason why the Colorado state legislature was taking action on this was because of the impact on property taxes. Only local governments collect property tax. The state doesn't. There is no state property tax. Property taxes are paid on a proportion of the property's value known as the taxable value or assessed value. It is calculated by multiplying the value by the assessment rate. And we'll talk more about that and your assessor at your county level and all that good stuff shortly. Proposition HH lowers the property taxes owned by property owners compared to what they will be owed without this measure. Property values have increased significantly in most areas of the state, resulting in higher property taxes owed. The measure results in a smaller increase in property taxes than under the current law. And that's why we say it relieves or reliefs property tax, the higher property tax. The impact of an individual property owner depends on the type and value of property and the tax rate for the local government where the property is located. This chart gives an example of a primary residence and multifamily properties where it's valued at $350,000. Your tax bill could be $179 to $239 less if Prop HH were to pass. And then the following year in 2024, it would be even more of a reduced amount. That's why I was saying that Prop HH has a long-term view. Now, keep in mind that these property tax savings would depend on whether or not your local government waives the new revenue limits created by Prop HH. And like I said at the very beginning, there is a calculation tool that we will look at that you can put in your property and it will tell you more. The impact on state revenue retention is a big part of HH. It creates a new cap on the amount of money the state can retain. It's higher than the current cap that was established by voters when referendum C, do you remember that? Back in 2005, we passed referendum C that changed the Tabor regulations to allow us a little bigger cap. Now this cap is even higher than that. Proposition HH allows the state to retain additional revenue up to the new cap, which grows by population growth and inflation plus 1% point each year. The measure allows the state to retain an estimated 170 mil in state budget for 2023-24 and approximately 360 million in the state budget for 2024-25 fiscal year. The state can retain revenue after 2032 without further vote if property tax decreases equivalent to those in the measure are maintained. So this is what I was saying about the far-reaching power of Prop HH. It looks forward 10 years. If property tax decreases equivalent are not maintained, the cap reverts to the current Tabor calculations, mostly growing by inflation and property growth, and Tabor refunds, if any, would be larger. So we're talking about a lot of money here. So where does it go? The retained revenue will be used to reimburse local governments and school districts for lost property tax revenue as a result of this measure. Here's the breakdown. Up to 20% to reimburse eligible local governments, up to 20 million each year for rental assistance. And the Bell policy breaks down this rental assistance a little bit more in detail. If you're a renter or if someone in your family is concerned about the rental assistance that Prop HH will get, I definitely would refer you to the Bell policy material. It takes a look at that rental assistance in a little bit more detail, and it's pretty clean and clear. And then the remaining funds to reimburse school districts for their loss in revenue due to the lower or the relief of property tax. Tabor refunds. Woohoo! Here in Jefferson County, we're getting a check being mailed October 16th, I think. I just heard from the county treasurer. Tabor refunds are a big touch point with Prop HH. And this is where the rubber meets the road. The Colorado Constitution includes a section, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, commonly known as Tabor, limiting the amount of money that a state government can collect and spend or save every year. Voter approval is required to retain the money above the Tabor limit. And if the money is collected above the limit, the excess must be refunded to the taxpayers, and that's hence what a Tabor refund is. Under current law, Tabor refunds to taxpayers are typically distributed through the state income tax based on taxpayers' adjusted gross income. But in Proposition HH, they want to change things. And for the 2023 tax year, only 1 year, refunds would be distributed on an equal amount for each taxpayer. And the actual amounts refunded depend on the final state revenue for the 2022-2023 budget, because they always, are a year. We don't give away money we don't have yet. Once they figure out the budget, then we figure out how much we're going to get. But this measure impacts the Tabor refund over long term too. But let's talk about the short term. It changes the way they figure the refund, and they want to base it on the taxpayer filing status instead of the adjusted gross income. So if you're a single filer, let me go back. If you're a single filer, you would get about $898 back. And if you were a joint filer, you'd get about $1,796, so $1,796 back. Now, of course, they have to finish the budgeting for 2022-23 to make sure that those are golden numbers. But those are the estimates they're giving in the Blue Book, which is the Colorado Legislative Council's fiscal evaluation. So that's just for 2023. Going forward in 2024 and 25, it would be revert back to adjusted gross income. And the impact over long term depends on population growth, inflation, and state revenue collections, because it's Tabor. And absent future policy changes, state revenue collections are largely driven by economic activity. So we can only estimate. In this slide, if we look at the projected change in Tabor refunds for 2024 and 25 under Prop H, if you had will have an adjusted gross income of $52,000 to $103,000, you'd be losing about $42 in Tabor refunds. And like I had mentioned before, there is a calculation tool that's available from the Colorado legislature that will tell you even more specifically what your refund would be in the future. And we'll look at that in a little bit. But this shows the amount of money that would be the refund amount under current law versus under Proposition HH. And you can see that the change in the refund here in the last column. The changes in Prop HH are in place until 2032. Remember, I told you about long term, but the measure allows the state legislature to expand them without additional voter approval if passing equivalent tax cuts. So every year, the Colorado legislature is going to have to determine how much they're going to give back in Tabor refunds. And it'll be determined one of three ways, whether we have higher revenue or lower revenue. The first one is when the state revenue exceeds the new Prop HH cap. Remember that 1% plus each year, that new cap. If it exceeds it, Tabor refunds will decrease. When the state revenue exceeds the current referendum C revenue cap and is less than the new Prop HH cap, Tabor refunds will be eliminated. And then when the state revenue falls below the current Ref C cap, the measure will have no impact at all because there wouldn't be any Tabor refunds anyway, because we're under all the caps that have been set. On to local government. How does Prop HH affect local government revenue? You know, cities, towns, counties, school districts, special districts. We've been learning a lot about special districts here in the Jefferson County area from our special district team. They collect property taxes to fund public schools, local services such as road maintenance, police departments, fire protection, water and sewer infrastructure, parks, libraries. You know, here at League, we always say, what do you want government, you know, to pay for, and how do you want them to pay for it? Due to the new property tax revenue limits and limited property taxes, if Prop HH passes, revenue for local governments will decrease compared to what local governments are authorized to collect under the current law. Because HH is given a break to property taxes, the local governments are going to feel that squish. Not all local governments that collect property taxes are treated the same way in Prop HH. Let's look at the differences. Under the new law, there's a new limit on property tax revenue. Local governments that are not currently subject to other revenue limits cannot collect property tax revenue above the amount they collected in the prior year plus inflation. So this is the Prop HH local government limit they were talking about. If the local government exceeds this limit, it must refund any property tax revenue collected over the limit to taxpayers, or lower its tax rate so they reduce their mill levy. If they're a special district, if they're, you know, the fire department, sewer and water, all those lovely mill levies that are on our tax bill. But they reduce them for 1 year under Prop HH. They're required to reduce them. Another option would be to waive the limit by adopting an ordinance, by notifying the public, holding a meeting for public comment, and then adopting an ordinance or a resolution. But they do have to do that publicly. And they can only waive the limit each year they have to do that every year. They can't just do it once and be done. So like I said, this is a big stick point with quite a few local governments. And like I said, a few of the county commissioners throughout the state have come up against HH, partly because of this. Now, there are exceptions to this new limit. School districts and home rule jurisdictions are not subject to this limit. I've noticed working on Vote 411 as a statewide rep that there are quite a few home rule charter questions on the ballot this year. Superior, Erie, Rush, there's a lot of smaller jurisdictions that are looking into becoming home rule. And I just have to ask myself, I wonder if it has to do with Prop HH. But anyway, so those are the two exceptions for Prop HH, that those limitations. School districts don't have to give back money, and home rule jurisdictions. Local government reimbursements. Prop HH kind of tries to counter. Okay, we're taking away revenue from the local government, but what can we give you back? As we mentioned earlier, some revenue losses due to property tax reductions will be partially offset through reimbursements from the state. Based on the type of local government, the population of the county in which the local government is located, and the growth of the property tax value in the jurisdiction, reimbursements will range from 65% to 100% of lost revenue. But it depends upon the population, where you're located, and the growth of your value. Counties, cities, towns, and special districts will be eligible for reimbursement unless their assessed value exceeds the 2022 level by 20% or more. That's the threshold. Smaller counties, or those with slower property value growth, will generally receive the higher reimbursement rates. School districts will be fully refunded through the public school funding formula using money retained by the state. So in summary, Prop HH would relieve property tax bills, it would fund schools and reimburse local governments using the state Tabor surplus up to the new HH revenue cap. This concludes the HH portion, but I did want to point out a few of these resources. First off, the Colorado Legislative Council Blue Book has many, many more charts than what I had here on my screen today, and gives a better fiscal picture, a deeper fiscal picture of how Prop HH impacts. And they also are providing this calculation tool. There is the website, hhcalc.ops.coleg.gov, or the QR code. So if you have your smartphone laying around at this time, you could pick a picture of this QR code on the screen, and it would take you to this website. This QR code and this information is also in the Blue Book. And I know I got my Blue Book yesterday in the mail, so I think they're hot off the press. If you haven't received it yet, check it out. They are online. And the audio, I checked it yesterday, the audio wasn't up yet, but I think it will be today. So Nancy, what questions do we have on HH? I'm going to stop sharing. Do we have nothing in the chat?
I don't have anything in the chat.
Do you guys know all this already?
I guess I did raise my hand, but not in the chat. Is that? I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that talks about reimbursing for revenue lost, but it seems to me that it's not so much lost as the increase is limited. The increase in revenue from increased property taxes is limited. So it's not revenue lost, right? Yeah. Am I correct?
And you can look at it that way, definitely. And that's where these words like cut, relieves, loss, reduction, increase, they get very technical. And really, you've got it straight in your mind, Mary. HH is giving homeowners a discount on their property taxes. A $50,000 chunk is going to be off your assessed value up front. So
Maybe.
of course you're going to be paying less to the local government.
Right.
So yeah, you're thinking of it right.
Okay. Okay.
So I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Deb, how are you?
Okay, I'm good, thank you. I can't see me for some reason, but I can hear you. And I can see most of you. So, some of what I'm hearing, I know nothing about HH. I'm just getting back to the state. I did get my blue book yesterday. Some of what I am hearing and seeing a little bit is discussion about how repealing Gallagher caused trouble that this HH is trying to address. Can you
that's-
speak to that a little bit?
That is the catalyst. Gallagher, let me pull up my Gallagher sheet so I'm not misspeaking. If you guys just give me 1 second here. Gallagher was repealed. Gallagher, was it an act or an amendment? I can't remember, but Gallagher worked to take individual property tax and business taxes, property taxes, and it percentaged them out to what an individual would have to pay on their private residential property versus business property. Gallagher was repealed, and with that, the protections surrounding making businesses pay more were lost. And then it fell onto the property owners, the residential property owners, to make up the difference.
Right.
And that's just like the crackerjack version of Gallagher. I am not a Tabor Gallagher expert. As you guys well know, it takes decades to get this stuff down pat. But I'm sorry.
No, I think that's kind of as accurate as an understanding as I might have as well. But what I'm worried about is the multiple phases of complications in this HH. That we voted for Gallagher, we supported, we thought it was a good idea to repeal Gallagher for lots of good reasons. I mean, I voted to repeal it, and I thought it was going to help, and in the end, it didn't help. And
Yeah.
I am really worried about the multiple layers of this whatever ballot issue, not working the way we think it's going to work and actually making things worse. That's what I'm worried about here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's where I'm pulling up my sheet as we speak.
Yeah, no,
It's just really
no one can have this on the tip of their fingers. That I will say.
I did write it though.
Yeah, good girl.
So I know it's in here.
If anybody could, it would be you. Yeah.
But okay, here we go. Property tax overview. Where's the Gallagher stuff?
I don't think we ever know what a bill is actually going to do when we vote for or against it. I mean, it's a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And and this is nowhere near a league opinion. This is just my personal opinion. It came from the Colorado legislature. So I kind of rely on that more than I would a citizen's initiative, to where at least you would hope there was a little bit more thought behind it and they had the expertise behind it with their decision making. On the previous meeting, Tuesday night or Monday afternoon, wherever it was, that Christine and Rebecca did, Tracy
Craft Clark.
Thank you.
Clark,
I always
yeah.
mix up her last hyphenated name. Thank you. Was on that call, and she did talk a little bit about it, but not so much. Speaking from a local government level, Tracy was, and she did not like the way it affected the local government. That was her concern. Her concern was not about the ramifications of the property taxes long term.
Yeah.
She just didn't like the limit.
Yeah.
And here we go. Here's this section.
Marilyn has her hand up. Marilyn, you're muted.
Still muted.
I'm on a different subject. Do we want to change the subject a little bit?
I do want to just point out, I'm reading this really quick. Two factors, Deb, it sounds like here. Over time, total residential property value statewide grew faster than total commercial property value.
Okay.
So that had an impact. And then to maintain the Gallagher ratio of property tax collected, assessment rates for residential properties fell dramatically. So while a non-residential assessment rate might be 27%, the residential assessment rate is currently only 6.765. So it is required, it was required that 45% of the total amount of state property tax collected came from residential and 55 from commercial. And the Gallagher amendment was overturned and that was pulled out.
Right.
So without the Gallagher amendment limit, the proportion of property tax coming from residential property taxes could rise relative to commercial property tax revenue levels.
Right.
And that's the concern, because you can see from 27% to 6.765, I mean, that's a huge gap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Prop HH is trying to limit that.
Okay, thanks. I know it's complicated, but I appreciate the.
Marilyn?
Yeah, okay, well, first one comment. I thought there was a rule that you could only change one thing in one bill, and this seems like they're addressing umpteen thousand things.
Well, that is a really good question, because there was a Supreme Court ruling, because this was brought up in front of the Colorado Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court rejected a challenge to its constitutionality and did not rule on the merits of the claim that questioned the measure's constitutionality, but instead found a precedent preventing them from addressing it until the voters have passed it.
Oh my goodness.
So if this passes, it might
gonna
go
be
back to the
challenged.
Supreme. I'm
Yep.
sure it'll go back to the Supreme Court. But the claim argued that Prop HH, by both reducing state residential property tax assessment rate and retaining state revenues that are normally refunded through Tabor, it violates the requirement that ballot measures only cover single subject.
Yeah.
The court also rejected, I'm reading this, by the way, if you cannot tell, I wrote this up in my FAQs. The court also rejected a second part of the lawsuit that argued the wording of HH is overly confusing and leaves out key details on what the proposition would do. Justices found the proposition meets constitutional requirements in those areas. So the Supreme Court did rule that it was, it rejected that second lawsuit, saying it was confusing or left out key details. So that again addresses kind of Deb's issue of, is this crossing the T's and dotting the I's? The Supreme Court thought it was,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the real question I had was simple compared to the rest of this. And that's on the senior 10-year discount, when you live in the same home. You said you carry that with you if you move. Okay, do you have to do the first 10 years in a home, in your first home, put it that way?
No, it immediately, it's an immediate deduction.
Okay,
You retain your reduction even though you're in a brand new location,
right,
first year.
okay.
I think that wasn't the question she
It-
asked.
Yeah,
Does
that
that make
wasn't what
sense?
she asked.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, okay, what question did you think I asked?
That if you had to be in the house before for 10 years.
Yeah, the
first house.
house, your first house.
Well, you had to be eligible and get the senior exemption currently on your tax bill. And this
Okay,
doesn't start, I think it starts, does anybody know for sure? I think the senior exemption thing starts in 2025. That it's portable.
oh. So right now, you have to live in the same, well, it starts when you're 65, right?
Right. And that,
Okay, so you have to live for 10 years in your first house before it becomes portable?
you
I
have,
think so.
I believe so.
Okay, okay. I thought it was simple, but,
It, the blue book does go into it a little
I
bit
don't think that's
more.
well, I read the darn blue book.
Yeah. But I
So
can,
I
I can
wasn't
find
sure.
out too, and maybe that's a question we put in the voter too.
Yeah, okay,
Pen. I don't know, where's my pen? I didn't even move.
okay, well, thank you anyway for that.
Page 7 in the blue book says the same reduction in property taxes for primary residents beginning in 2025. Seniors who have qualified for the homestead exemption can receive the same benefit if they purchase and move.
To a new home, yeah,
Yeah,
So you have to currently be getting it,
yeah.
starting at least 2025.
so you had to live in your first home 10 years or you don't get it. You
By
haven't got it.
2025, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, and you should have applied for it.
yeah.
And then
Okay.
Marilyn, did we answer your question? Do you want to take down your hand?
Oh,
And-
sorry, yes, I do.
And Nancy, who was next? Do you know?
I
We
think
have a Holly and a Diane.
I think Holly might be next, but I'm not certain.
I sent something in the chat, but
Oh,
haven't
great.
gotten any reaction to it. So my question, my background's in water quality, and there are a whole lot of water districts that are going to be
Yep.
hit by this. But it sounds like they cannot increase any fees to make up that up to 35% of income loss. So how are they supposed to make that up?
Well, and an argument does, and I'm not saying this is my argument, just saying that the argument is that their increase that they've received because the property values have gone up so high
Mhm.
that they're making so much more money already that by deducting this back down, whatever you want to say, loss, decrease, taking away, that it still brings them at a doable level with the reimbursement from the government, from the
Okay, but my question, I mean, I understand that, and I understand what one of you said about being, that it's a slower increase rather than cutting in.
Mhm.
It's cutting the increase. But I guess I know a lot of water quality groups that, a lot of these districts that at least claim that they're just scraping for pennies, because they cannot keep up with the increased costs based solely on population and inflation.
Yeah.
So I'm just
Tabor,
question-
yeah. Tabor is a thorn in our side that limits revenue growth
Yeah.
to a restrictive level. And this is it's like Prop HH looks at property taxes and not a whole lot more, unfortunately. So yeah, government, local governments at all levels in all different districts are feeling
Please.
yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to see if there were any additional insights. Thank you.
Andy?
Well, isn't it because property taxes just went up a huge amount?
Hmm.
I mean, they're gonna get a lot more money. There's no doubt about it. Everybody's been complaining about their property tax going up, right?
Yep.
So, I mean,
Well, go ahead.
they're gonna get a lot more money, and so will the county.
So Deb,
But
do you?
well,
you-
just to say back to that, I mean, I don't want to, we're not going to debate 8H but the answer back to that, this is a 10-year lookout. So they may have gotten some bigger money, recently this year, last year, but we're looking out 10 years in this issue, this question, and that money will evaporate over time, and who knows, the property values will continue to go up over that 10-year stretch. And so
I hope
that's
not.
well, I mean, that's what this is trying to offset, but then that
Yeah.
offsets their, they've gotten a big jump maybe in the last 2 years, but that may not continue for 10 years.
Yeah. We don't know what if we knew
Yeah.
what the future would bring. Now, the
think
Blue
that-
Book does do fiscal projections out the 10 years, but I did not review them, and I'm not going to look at them now, but they are in there. Also, too, Bell policy is, historically great with their fiscal evaluation of ballot issues. And Bell policy has a fact sheet. If you just Google Bell policy Prop HH, it'll bring you to their page that has a fact sheet that's 3 pages that really talks about that fiscal impact in more greater detail in plain language. So it's a big help there too. If we're okay, I'd like to move on to II.
Can I just ask one question, Kath? Because
Sure.
this is Diane, your neighbor.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hello. Very curious. Has the league taken a position on Prop HH?
Thank you for asking. As a matter,
Okay, and I have a second question.
yeah.
Are counties going to be waging the war that challenges the constitutionality?
I don't know who put forward the lawsuit. I did not look into that initially. I just know once the ruling came out, I didn't look further into it. So I don't know who brought the first impact, but I'm assuming it's the same people that brought the first lawsuit is gonna open up the can of worms if it passes. Yes, the state league has come out with a position on both Prop HH and II in support of. And to learn more about that, I'll be sharing at the end of the presentation where to go for that. We have a pamphlet that's new this year called Where the League Stands. And it's also on our website under Take Action. But the colorful, beautiful brochure talked about our 2 positions, and I didn't design it, so I can brag about it. Katrina, our communications and development chair, is brilliant with graphics and has really come up with something cool. But the Where the League Stands booklet, and I can show you the link to it when we're all done tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Okay, I'm going to go back and hold on. Here I am. Go back to the lovely slideshow. Where am I? Who's left already? Oh my God. Maybe they're just going to get more wine.
Only a few.
Yeah, I got my Halloween glass out, you guys. I don't know if you can see it. See it? Oh. Anyway,
Very cute.
I can't do ballot measures without a little wine. What can I say? Okay, so Prop II is the second measure that's going to be on the state ballot. It retains nicotine tax revenue in excess of the Blue Book estimate. Now, for those in the room, I think we all know what the Blue Book is. The Colorado Legislative Council. Anytime a proposition or a referendum or ballot issue comes on board that has any kind of fiscal impact on Tabor, the Blue Book analysis comes out. And in it, they estimate the amount of revenue that's going to be generated if this proposition passes. Back in 2020, under Proposition EE, voters approved a tax on cigarettes, tobacco, and other nicotine products. And in the first year of the tax, the state collected more revenue than we estimated in the Colorado Legislative Council's Blue Book. The excess revenue, we believe, was mostly due to tax revenue from nicotine products such as e-cigarettes and vaping products. But it blew it out of the water. And currently, the Colorado Constitution requires that the state refunds the excess revenue according to Prop EE to the wholesalers and distributors of the tobacco and nicotine products and permanently reduce the tax rate on those products. Or they can ask the voters to allow the state to keep the revenue collected from the new tax, which is why Prop II is on the ballot. The state legislature is coming back to the voters and saying, hey, in 2020, you said we could do this, and we collected more than we need, like more than we thought. Can we keep it? And then also, can we increase the tax?
Oh, crap.
II is asking, but it's minimal, and we'll talk about that. And it's going to go for something really good.
Oh, yeah. Believe it when it happens.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about it. So in summary, we're going to cover the overview, what your vote means, and then the impact on tax rates and the revenue retention and where it's going to go. So already we have collected $20 million more than we thought, which blows my mind because the Blue Book estimate is usually pretty close. And this just was like crazy, crazy money. But under Proposition II, it would use the over $20 million already collected for the universal free preschool program, rather than refunding it to the nicotine and tobacco wholesalers and distributors. So these refunds were never going to go back to the public. They were never going to be a part of a Tabor refund to the public. It was always going to go back to the wholesalers and distributors. A yes vote means that the state can keep and spend over $20 million in tax revenue that's already been collected from the sale of cigarettes, tobacco, and nicotine products, including interest, to maintain the current tax rates on these products. The tax revenue would be spent on preschool programs. A no means that that money goes out the state door and it's refunded to the wholesalers and distributors of cigarettes, tobaccos, and nicotine products, and the tax rate on those products would be reduced because we collected more than we thought we were gonna. Cool. Can I change the screen, Marianne? I see you taking a picture. Okay. Here is a chart with a lot of arrows. Okay. This breaks it down, the three types of taxes that are currently, because of Prop EE that we passed back in 2020. It's a cigarette tax that's based on a pack of 20, a tobacco products that's a percentage of the price, and a nicotine product that's a percentage of the price. But you can see at the pre-Proposition EE tax rates, and then Proposition EE raised it to the total tax rate that it's at currently. If Proposition II passes, the tax rates would go up. And it's displayed in the second and third columns.
Oh dear.
And let me see what else it says about this.
Why do we have to go up?
Let me see, future taxes. If it fails, the tax rate would be reduced by 11%. Because it would not go below the pre-Proposition EE tax rate. So if you look on this chart, you'll see under like cigarettes, it says pre-Proposition EE taxes, those would stay. And that's why it's 84 cents, 84 cents, 84 cents. The Proposition II does not change pre-EE tax rates. The 40% would stay. The nicotine products were never taxed before EE, and that's the vaping and the e-cigarettes. That's why Proposition EE passed in 2020, I think, to kind of bring those into the fold. So if it fails, it would be reduced by 11%, and pre-Prop EE taxes would stay in place regardless of the outcome of Prop II. And the impact on revenue, the revenue collected from cigarettes, tobacco, and other nicotine products for the first year alone was $208 million.
Oh, good Lord.
It was approximately over $21.5 million over the Blue Book estimate. This excess revenue has earned more than $2 million in interest. And that's why the total is over 23 million for this year. And that's why the state is asking to keep that figure of 23 million. It's the excess of the Blue Book plus the interest. If Proposition II passes, the state will keep and spend the over 23 million along with future revenue collected by maintaining that tax rate and then adding the tax rate increases previously approved by voters under Prop EE. And we would spend it on universal free preschool. Tax revenues would be used to support universal free preschool program, which provides part-time preschool programming for all children in the year before kindergarten and 3- and 4-year-old children with disabilities. Additional preschool programming is also available under the program for low-income families and at-risk children. For the 2023 budget, spending would increase by the amount of the refund plus the increase in state revenue, which brings the total to about 38 mil. The preschool program would receive about 32 million of that, and 5 and change would be available for spending at the state general fund. But the bulk of it would go for universal preschool. For the 2024 budget, spending on preschool programs would increase by 32 million, funded by future tax increases on cigarettes, tobacco products, and nicotine previously set under Proposition EE. So this is what II is a little tricky. It's really not asking you to increase the tax rate on these products because Proposition EE already had that in the language and we voted on that and passed it in 2020. But because we collected more money than we estimated, we have to reduce that tax rate so that we don't collect more money in the future. Thank you, Tabor. So II is a workaround. Proposition II would use over 20 million already collected in nicotine tobacco taxes for preschool programs rather than refund this revenue to nicotine and tobacco wholesalers and distributors. And of course, for more fiscal analysis, Blue Book. What questions do you have? I'm going to stop sharing.
Not really.
I have a question. Why, with this particular, with EEII, that excess tax money goes back to the distributors rather than to the people, the customers who paid that extra tax when they purchased tobacco products? That seems like it's different than anything else.
Yeah, that's how Proposition EE was written and passed.
Ah, okay.
II does not change that initial part.
Ah,
Well, that's hardly what you want to see happen.
And like we had mentioned earlier, Prop II, of course, the state League of Colorado has come out as support. You know, our stand on education, especially early education. We believe that it's an investment in the future. And,
Well, it is.
and it saves taxpayers money down the line. But we all know the rationale behind that. I mean, 90% of you guys are probably from the school. From a school background, from a teaching background or a professional element.
Well, you answered my question because I was wondering if this was going to be subject to a multiple question review as well. If Prop II increased the tax rate and
It doesn't.
the revenue, but since the tax rate is included in EE, that's not the case.
Right.
Okay.
But I like to tell people that if II fails,
the tax rate decreases.
right, the tax rate will have to be decreased because we get more money.
Right.
And the Constitution doesn't allow us to do that.
And I will say, just in the idea of refunding the taxes, to think of the bazillions of users who paid that tax with each purchase, tracking that. I mean, you can see why EE was written that way. I mean, to give it back to the distributors or the producers, that's a little odd, but the idea that you could refund this directly to the purchasers would be onerous.
Yes, but isn't refunding it to the people that sell it or handle it supporting private business?
Yeah, it's a weird
That
thing. Totally
my
agree.
goodness. I think I had better be passed because education needs the money more.
Than tobacco producers, yeah, totally.
Well, then, yes,
Agree.
of course, I'm not a smoker.
It probably was a compromise issue that they had to come to some agreement with somebody who was not liking the whole thing.
Probably.
Yeah.
Call it compromise.
Oh, boy.
So I know you guys probably know this, but I'm going to go through it anyway. Hold on one second. Let me I got to share my graphic one more time. I'm sorry. I love seeing your smiling faces, though. I really do. You know, Election Day is November 7th. In Colorado, all registered voters will be mailed a ballot starting October 16th through October 20th. All ballots must be received by the clerk's office by 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 7th, and can be mailed or dropped off. starting on Monday, October 16th. Drop boxes along with voter service and polling centers, VSPCs, will be available for your voting convenience. Locations and hours will be included in with your ballot. So all that extra paraphernalia that comes in your ballot, keep that sheet. You can sign up to track your ballot. Have you guys tried this? This is like so cool. Ballot
Yeah.
tracks. I get these messages on my phone, these text messages. We've mailed out your ballot, Catherine. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, we've received your ballot, Catherine. We've processed your ballot, Catherine. It's like so cool.
I think it's the coolest thing on earth. And that they track it that closely for you, so you have no question that your ballot has been received and that's been processed and counted. And then if there is a problem, you would get a text message saying you need to come in and cure your ballot. And so that's on top of it, spectacular turnaround. Yep. I love it.
And that's the other part that I wanted to tell people too. If there is a signature discrepancy on your ballot, there is that text to cure. So you'll be notified. If you set up for ballot tracks, they'll notify you that there's a signature discrepancy, and you can text them and they can resolve it. And you can, get a new ballot. You can, there's like 40,000 different ways to do it, but it's not so much for us. But if you have first-time voters or younger people in your life that are voting, signatures nowadays don't match.
Illegible.
How you signed your driver's license.
I just signed for an Amazon package today that
Yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
hardly get.
Yeah, like, the finger signature, so keep in mind that, for younger people that are not used to having a signature, this is a big thing. And so make sure to inform them about that text to cure. And that information is on the last page of the ballot issue pamphlet, that text to cure information. So it is on that handout and our new fancy dancy ballot issue pamphlet. Also on the back side of that fancy dancy ballot issue pamphlet is, let me get this up really quick.
Golden has some questions.
Golden has some.
Golden has 3 questions.
Okay. Are they
One
all
is-
paper or?
One is an Airbnb tax, which does kind of take that out from under the cap, I think.
Yeah.
No, it's not an Airbnb tax. It's
Lodging tax.
it's similar to II. We underestimated the amount of lodging tax
Yeah.
that we collected, so we have to ask the voters to keep the 500,000+ that we underestimated. That's the lodging tax one, and then there's one to change the charter to update it to gender neutral language. And then there's the big one to fund the fire department with a property tax mill levy increase.
Is that
which
the
is-
North Metro Fire District? What fire district?
No, that's not the consolidation question. This is Golden.
Okay.
Yeah, looking for a mill levy to fund Golden Fire. There is a
I think they're going to merge with
No, they're not. The city
No.
council decided on a standalone model, which is the most cost-effective
Oh.
model. They did
they
consider
must have just done that, huh?
merging with West Metro or Arvada.
Yeah.
But they decided not to. They considered a lot of different factors. So this is a standalone combination, staffed and volunteer fire department.
But there is a Mountain Parks area Elkhorn Fire District consolidation question. Something about those fire districts wanting to consolidate. But we didn't get it till too late, so we have not looked into that deeply enough to know.
Okay.
how we feel
The
about that.
fire departments are pretty good. Rule of thumb, just looking at it from a Vote 411's perspective, usually if I go to the fire department's website, they usually have their pro statements on why they're looking to do what they're doing. And they even sometimes do a video because they have such a high risk of not passing, they really make the effort to get the information out to the voter at their website level.
What's an example of special districts that are gonna be exempt from HH?
There pretty much aren't any unless they're home rule jurisdictions, and those are cities or towns.
And because in Evergreen, we're about to vote on funding for the Evergreen Recreation District. And so the question is, will HH, how will HH and that interact?
That is a good question. If the local government exceeds the limit, and the limit is, the new cap will limit property tax increases to no more than the prior year's revenue plus inflation for local taxing districts. There are approximately 220 tax or special districts that collect property tax revenue in Jeffco. If Prop HH passes, the local taxing districts, such as a water district, cannot collect more property tax revenue than the new cap. If the taxing district exceeds this cap, it must refund it to its constituents. If the district determines it is necessary to exceed this limit, they may do so after holding a public meeting or passing an ordinance or resolution. Keep in mind that if the special district is limited by the current Tabor revenue caps, then the Prop HH new caps would probably not come into play, as the current caps are more limiting. So did they, DeBruce? If yes, the Prop HH new cap would apply.
Great, well, thank you. This has been helpful and I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
And then